Hey, Phil Long family, I'd like to say hello. Thank you for taking a little bit of your time today and joining us in the virtual coffee chat. Today, we're going to talk about cardiovascular endurance in the series of the 5 components of health-related fitness. And cardiovascular endurance is commonly called aerobics. That's a generic term. You might have heard of that. Or it's also called heart health. And we're going to address all of this in detail with our program today. So again, thanks for everyone checking in and kind of give you the agenda that we're going to do. Like I said, cardiovascular endurance. This is the 4th chat on the 5 components of health-related fitness in our series, and we'll finish that up next week with our last one is a summary of all of the systems and how you can get the most out of your health for the rest of your life. And as usual, real quickly, I'd like to differentiate between my doctorate, which is a Doctor of Philosophy, a PhD, and that of a medical doctor, an MD, a medical doctor, or a DO, Doctor of Osteopathy. The medical doctors, they prescribe medicine and they help to cure people or manage people's health after they've been diagnosed with a chronic disease or an illness. Whereas my specialty is really all involved in behavior change and helping people to change their lifestyle so they can reduce the likelihood of getting chronic diseases through proper nutrition, stress management, physical activity, and things of that nature. So again, I've always want to make sure I point that out so people don't call me to prescribe drugs for them. We got another quarter hour of wellness power. And like I said, heart health is what we're talking about today. So if you have any questions or if you have a comment that you'd like to put in there, please let us know in the chat room, and I'll answer that at the end in our Q&A session. And as usual, I'd like to say thank you to Kangaroo Coffee for sponsoring these virtual coffee chats. It's a great sponsorship to have them, and if you get the chance, go ahead and give them a little business getting some coffee. So real quick, actually I've got 2 disclaimers today. You've seen this one before, and again, I would encourage you, if you're going to do anything that involves physical activity, especially if you have not been active or getting a little bit older in your age, please consult your physician before you start any kind of program. I've got another one that's a little bit more detailed as a result of the conversation we're having today on cardiovascular health, and I'll address that here in just a minute. So well, let's get into it. Let's talk about cardiovascular health and our cardiovascular system. Well, what exactly is that? Well, it's made up of our heart, our arteries, capillary beds, and then veins, and then the veins return blood to the heart. And just real quickly, when your heart beats, it presses out oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich blood, and it's actually at the capillary beds where the oxygen transfer takes place to the cellular level. Nutrients like glucose and fat and proteins are absorbed by the body. And then on the other side of the capillary bed, you've got nutrient waste. You've got byproduct of metabolism. You've got oxygen-poor blood that's collected, again, by your capillaries, goes to your veins, and then it returns to your right atrium to be oxygenated through the lungs and so forth. So imagine a big circle. Your heart's pushing the blood around. It goes through your arteries, your capillaries, and then it returns through your venous system. And this is a general rule, but the more aerobically conditioned you are, the more cardiovascularly fit you are, in general, the lower heart rate you have. And if you have a resting heart rate that's in the 60s, that's really pretty good. Low 70s is also good. And the best time to take a heart rate is really in the morning before you get out of bed or before you eat any food. That's probably the most accurate time to get that. Now, in addition to cardiovascular health, believe it or not, your cardiovascular system can be broken down further into an aerobic component and an anaerobic component. But both of these are kind of like a teeter-totter, and they work together, but they both have big jobs and they're differentiated a little bit. And I'm going to show you that here in just a second on a slide. But all of this running we do, weightlifting and exercising and so forth, it represents about 30% of your nutritional needs. And we covered that last week in our body composition conversation. And really the higher lean body mass you have, all other things being considered, the greater nutrient need that you have, because a kilogram of muscle or lean body mass takes about 50 calories a day to keep alive, whereas a kilo of body fat only takes about 3 calories. So lean body mass is tremendously much more metabolically active, and you have to feed that to keep it. So with that, here's that additional health risk or health assessment I'd mentioned. It's called PAR-Q and U, and they ask you 7 very direct questions about your health. And if you answer yes to any of them, please contact your medical doctor before you start any kind of physical activity. It's because a lot of this is related to your cardiovascular system. And unlike a lot of the other systems that we're talking about, cardiovascular health can have a direct and profound influence on your health. If you don't eat right and manage your cardiovascular health, unfortunately, it could cause premature death, where being inflexible or not having a bunch of muscular endurance or strength or having a high body composition, that's not nearly as life-threatening as having poor cardiovascular health. But most of those other systems and conversations we've had in the prior coffee chats do influence your cardiovascular health. So I want to point that out. So now, what is aerobic metabolism? I don't know if it's Greek or Latin. I have a hard enough time with English, but aerobic means in the presence of oxygen. So when you're doing cardiovascular or aerobic work, your oxygen system or your aerobic system is primarily contributing most of the energy needs required for whatever it is that you're doing. And if you remember back our conversation about muscular strength and endurance, I talked about slow twitch and fast twitch fibers. And the aerobic muscle fibers are generally the first recruited through the motor unit concept I mentioned earlier in the prior presentations. And then as intensity of activity gets greater and greater, your body recruits not only the type 1, but then it starts to recruit the type 2, which are the anaerobic muscle fibers. But for the vast majority of the things that we do, your aerobic metabolism cycle or system can really develop most of the energy needs that are necessary to do most of the things that you do throughout the day. And in addition to aerobic activities, things like hiking, biking, walking, jogging, swimming, these types of activities are really good for your cardiovascular health, like improving your cholesterol, your good cholesterol, reducing your bad cholesterol, improving your triglycerides and your glucose values for your blood system. You're basically, through physical activity, you're helping to improve your body's metabolic systems, and I highly encourage that. It's good for our long-term health. Now, what is anaerobic metabolism? Well, it's on the other side of the coin. And this type of activity involves highly intense, very strenuous activity that you really can't maintain for a long period of time. As you do anaerobic work, you're going to notice your heart rate and your respiration dramatically increase, because your aerobic system is trying to keep up with the energy demand that you're placing on your body. But there's even more that your aerobic system can apply, and that's where your anaerobic system comes in. Those type 2 muscle fibers start to twitch just as fast as the type 1. And you're able to fight or flight, run as fast as you can away from something, lift weights really heavy. Remember the mountain man that lifted that 1,100 pounds. So you need to train both of the systems to really get most out of your cardiovascular health. Now, real quickly, I'd like to share with you a chart where, based on your weight and the different types of activity, you notice you can get a wide variety of calories burnt per 30 minutes for the activity that you do. And if you're just getting started with cardiovascular health or health in general, remember, maybe start with flexibility or walking as a great means to transition into some of this more difficult things like jogging and weightlifting and so forth. But this is just a really nice chart to kind of make a comparison of the various types of activity out there. Now, what are we doing here? On the left-hand side, if you lived in a perfect utopian environment and your nutrition didn't influence your health or stress or sleep, a variety of these things, here is what you see what a normal artery looks like. It's actually got 3 layers of muscle, and On the right-hand side, if we kind of neglect our cardiovascular health, there's this stuff called plaque or atherosclerosis that can develop within the lumen, which is the opening of that artery. And you can see the diameter of that lumen gets much, much smaller. And that is kind of what causes heart disease. It gets so much that it eventually blocks. And if you get a blockage in your heart, that leads to a heart attack. If you get a blockage in your brain, that leads to a stroke. So we want to try to live a lifestyle that we have healthy arteries versus atherosclerotic types of arteries. Well, how do you do that? All right. Let me give some suggestions about things that you can do to make sure that you have good cardiovascular health. And that's eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, getting fiber in your diet. Beans are a great opportunity. Try to be as physically active as you can. And again, that would be more aerobically, the low intensity, longer duration activities like walking, stretching, even hiking. Now, the incline is not really a hike. That is an anaerobic type of activity. So I wouldn't recommend the incline over in Manitou the first time you start doing activity. Sedentary lifestyle. Again, we've mentioned if you sit around all day, yes, you can be very productive at your computer, but being sedentary is not good for a body. It can lead to varicose veins. Your muscles actually need to contract to help get blood back to your heart. And so when you've been walking, you're feeling a little bit tired. When we talked about the flexibility program, you're getting that 2 o'clock swoon. Try some of those stretches that we've mentioned. And if you're not quite sure what we're talking about, you can go to our Facebook page, and we've got videos of every coffee chat that we've had so far. So I want to do a little plug for the Healthy Habits Facebook page. Obesity, we kind of mentioned that in our last program, and it's just not good for your health. And in fact, there's a direct correlation between high compositions of body fat and that atherosclerosis developing in your heart muscle. And then how we manage stress is also critically important. If you don't manage stress well, you have a lot of stress hormones in your body like cortisol and adrenaline, non-adrenaline, that really can enhance the development of that atherosclerosis and the plaque that can show up in the coronary arteries of your heart. And one thing I'd like to mention, your heart, which is made of cardiac tissue, that's one of the 3 types of muscle tissue we talked about. Cardiac tissue or skeletal tissue, it has its own supply of blood, and that's called your coronary arteries and vessels. And you've heard of coronary artery disease possibly, and that's where those arteries get blocked. So we want to try really hard to make sure the plumbing of our bodies stays clean and clear. Now, some other things, some risky behaviors, and I'm not saying that these in and of themselves are risky, but in huge amounts, I would consider trying to do something else. And eating processed foods like lean cuisines and Marie calendars, stuff that we throw in the microwave, those really don't have a lot of good nutritional value. They've got calories, but they don't have good nutritional value. And these preservatives are, again, something that can build up in the arteries and cause this atherosclerosis that we were talking about. Look out for white carbs. That's flour and sugar-based foods, so breads, goodies, things like gummy bears come to mind, cookies and pastries. You can have those, but again, in excess, when that starts to make up a significant portion of your diet, that's not good for heart health. Diets high in animal products, so red meats and dairy, go ahead and eat those, but eat them in moderation. They should not make up each and every day the main portion of the foods that you eat. Being undermuscular, that's what this term skinny fat is. If you don't eat appropriately and your body needs nutrition, it actually catabolizes itself. It eats itself, it eats the muscle so that it can get at the sugar that's inside of protein and recycle that. And when that happens, you can have an appropriate weight for your height, but your lean body mass is extremely low, and that's a risk factor for things like osteoporosis, being frail and so forth when you get over. And then again, I'd like to conclude the presentation by sharing you a little bit about how you can actually measure your cardiovascular health. And you have a men and a women's classification based on age, but you can go to a track and get your timer going. You hit start and you try to cover as much distance as you can in 12 minutes. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to run, but just do the best you can. And you can see these aggregated scores here. So if you're a 27-year-old male and you can run about 1.5 miles, that's going to put you in the good fitness zone. And like I said, again, you don't want to do this if you haven't had an annual physical or spoken with your physician before you go out and try to do some cardiovascular work. Now, a couple things while we're winding up. I've gone a little bit over. I apologize for that, but I had a lot of good material. And we'd just like to kind of close the chat out in saying that really the 5 components of health-related fitness are areas that we need to focus on if we really want to have a great quality of life as we get older. And we're going to summarize all of this stuff information. Whether you missed a prior coffee chat or not is just fine. We're going to review all this and put it into a nice quantifiable line item so that you could pick up anywhere that you want and start on your own personal wellness journey. And I'd like to close out and say, if there's anything that I can help you with, please reach out to me at shuhalt@phillog.com. You can see it on our Facebook page, Phil on Healthy Habits. And let's try to see if there's anything that I can do to help you. I sure would like that opportunity to do that. I do have one question while we're getting out. Is there a best type of exercise for cardiovascular health overall? That's a great question. Again, I would promote an aerobic type of activity over weight training at first, although they're both good. And I would recommend find something that you enjoy doing and will consistently do. If you don't really like running, don't run because you're going to quit. But if you like walking, let's walk. Or if you like to ride your bike, do those things. Do things that you enjoy because you'll be much more likely to be consistent with those. And that's what a good program is made of. One that makes you're consistently doing and one that you're making small improvements on over time. And again, I'd love for you to help set up a program with you if you have any interest at that. But again, thank you for your time. I've gone over a little bit, but we'll see you next week at our next virtual coffee chat. Thanks again. Take care.